Hi guys, my name is Dr. Christopher Coulter, and I'm teaching the course for you this summer. This will be online, and the time will be every day. This course is not live. It's called asynchronous, which means that you're not necessarily reading at the same time that I'm at my desk. And all the material will be on your Moodle timeline. And each day you'll have clearly marked assignments and discussion sheets, and then quizzes and exams to fill out. I have uploaded for you the course schedule, which has all the rules basically, which are just to complete the material. We have one book, which is the Norton Anthology of Western Literature. Make sure you get volume 1. And also make sure you get Western literature, because several people in this department use something that looks like this, called world literature. But we're using the Western Lit, 9th edition, volume 1. And I have on the syllabus that I have the link where you can go and get this shipped to you from the bookstore. It's www.bkstr/leestore/home/edu. So you can rent the book used for about $32. You can rent it new if you want to for $50, or you can buy it new. That's about $92 apparently. So again, I will upload the syllabus, which is printed with all the dates, the due dates on it. And it has the grading, which it comes under a section called Evaluation, which is part 6, and that's the only part I'm going to really cover today. There will be 2 exams. One is a midterm, and one will be a final. And the final will not be comprehensive. Okay, so the final will only cover the material between the midterm and the final itself. And so those will be 20% each. You will have quizzes. They won't be daily quizzes, but they will come at the end of each major reading. So for example, the first work of reading is something called a Greek epic, word which I'll explain in a few minutes. But the Greek epic is essentially a narrative, and we're going to read the whole thing. Some of our works are excerpted, meaning they're brief parts of works that are taken out of major works. But this one called the Odyssey, we're going to read the complete Odyssey. But at the end of that, even though it takes 2 weeks, we're going to wait 2 weeks to have our quiz. And all the quizzes are the same length. There are 10 questions. And they will appear on the Moodle timeline as an icon with a hand under a sheet of paper. And you can click on them, and you will have a half hour to take them. That's much longer than typically my live class in the regular part of the year. They usually just take 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but I'll have it a half an hour for you. And I also have the slides available. The PowerPoint slides that go with the discussion sheets, those will be available until the quiz. So you can go back and refresh your memory with slides. You will also have my comments on your discussion sheets. So you can review the comments and go back and look at the discussion sheets and the slides. And you should be very well prepared for each quiz. So the quizzes are marked clearly in bold on the uploaded syllabus. And they're also marked on the Moodle timeline with the hand icon. And for the 2 exams, I will give you a study guide, and that will be a download for you. That will be in the same format that the exam is, except obviously I won't give you the objective part. We have an objective part, which is multiple choice, which is essentially who does what, identification. And then the second, third, and fourth parts will be short answers that will be the exact questions that will be on the exam. And so you can prepare for that, for the exam by looking up those answers and preparing some sort of outline for yourself. Okay, so back again to evaluation. So the exams together, 2 exams are 40%. The discussion sheets, which will be daily or for each reading, will be 10%. Quizzes cumulatively, they will be added up over the entire course, will be 20%, with the lowest quiz or possibly a missed quiz automatically dropped. The last assignment will be a response paper, which is due the last day of the course. And that is, for non-majors, will be a 2-page, double-spaced response without any research. It's just your opinion or response to 3 prompts that you will have your choice to discuss 1 work, or 2 works at most, and what you learned about them. If you're an English major, you have to write a 5-page double-spaced paper and use 2 external sources. They can be 2 journals, or they can be a book or biography, and then possibly another journal, or some sort of scholarly paper. You can email me about the requirements on that. Okay, so usually I talk about things like attendance in other courses, but that's not the case here. You just have to complete the reading and complete the sheets, and your grade is based upon simply what you complete and how well you do on that. Okay? The first day of the course, which will be Monday, June the 4th, and this course runs 4 weeks, and it ends on Thursday, June, which I believe is June the 26th, is that right? Let's see, let me make sure. Sorry, June the 20th, it's Friday, June the 29th. So we start on Monday, June 4th again, and we end on June 29th on a Friday. Exam 2 will be on the Thursday, and then the response papers will be due 29th. Okay, so on the first day of class, we are going to read something called an Epic and Myth handout, and it's just a 1-page download for you. And I'm going to cover it in a little ways, well, in some fashion for you. And then you're going to download through this little puzzle icon. There's a green puzzle-looking icon on the timeline. It's an external link to a YouTube film. And the YouTube film is called In Search of History. It's an old series on the History Channel. The Greek Gods. And that's because I can't assume that anybody necessarily has any background in the Greek gods, but the Greek gods are very important in the first work, the Odyssey, particularly Athena, who was the goddess of wisdom and family life. And so there's a discussion sheet that I want you to fill out that goes with the film. So let's talk a little bit about the epic characteristics in ancient literature. All right, and this is really the only subject we're covering today. And this is also the only film you'll see in this course, because I'm just trying to give you a taste of that I'm a real person, that I'm reading this stuff, and that I'm following along with you, even though you may not see me every day. So, what is an epic? Okay, it says epic characteristics in ancient literature. We use the term epic these days in popular speech. We typically use it as an adjective. We say that was an epic ball game, or that was an epic party, or whatever. But it means something very specific in history, which is it describes a literary form, or sometimes we use the French word genre, which simply means type or kind of literature. And an epic is a literary form. And I've made 10 characteristics for it after my years of teaching this. I came upon 10 characteristics that I believe relates and explains really every epic, whether it may be in the ancient world. We're going to read one Greek epic and one Roman epic. We're not going to read all of the Roman epic. It's called the Aeneid, and we're only going to read part of that excerpt. There are medieval epics. One is called the Song of Roland. It's about a French knights. And then we're going to read an epic that's in the form of a novel called Don Quixote. It's one of our last works. But the epic characteristics in ancient literature can usually be applied to almost any long narrative that comes from an original culture. So I thought I would apply it, since I know you haven't perhaps read the Iliad. Many of you have seen, maybe read part of the Iliad or the Odyssey in high school or in another course, but I'm going to apply it to a popular work called The Lord of the Rings. There was a guy named J.R.R. Tolkien, and the filmmaker Peter Jackson famously made these really well-received, what are called fan films, which are pretty close to the novel that J.R. Tolkien wrote. But they have much more to do with the look of the film, really, than the content or the themes of the film. Anyway, a lot of people think Tolkien was an English professor because he knew C.S. Lewis, but actually he was a professor of ancient Germanic script and Old Norse and Scandinavian scripts. And he was one of the few people, for example, who could read Old Icelandic. And it's a handful of about 5 people. And he taught at the University of Oxford. Even though he was German, he moved to England as a young man when he was 12 or so. And he spent most of his life in England. But when he first wrote The Lord of the Rings, which includes The Hobbit, that was written after the fact as a prequel, he meant for it to illustrate the values of the West and freedom and family and things like that against what were increasingly authoritarian forces in Europe, which rose up in the form of the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. So he delved back in ancient mythology from Old German, really, and Old Germanic times, prehistoric times, and came up with this Lord of the Rings. It came out in book form in the 30s and 40s when he originally wrote it, but nobody really read it. It wasn't until the 60s it was published in paperback, which was also the time that rock music was very influential in popular culture, and there was a rock band called Led Zeppelin, a British rock band. And most of their first 3 albums used the lyrics to Lord of the Rings. So because they were so popular, it became necessary to read that, and everybody in my generation read the paperback version of The Lord of the Rings, long before the movies, of course, came out. So let's look together at this characteristics and try to apply it maybe to The Lord of the Rings. So number 1, the action relates to a nation or city as well as a whole culture. Okay, in The Lord of the Rings, we have the hobbits who just live in these little English-type villages. But when we get to the human beings and the kingdoms, of course, they have an alliance, and that represents the human beings, and the elves, it represents those various nations represent the people who are allied with the free world, the West. And the action, of course, is usually some kind of military action. With the hobbits, it has to do with a subplot about taking what is symbolically represented in a ring that one of them finds innocently, as we find out has been taken by someone who used to be a hobbit and has now degraded himself and lives in a cave. He's called Gollum. And they have to get it back to the evil Sauron, who represents a kind of authoritarian, totalitarian, fascistic personality who is evil and uses slaves for his soldiers. Number 2 involves episodic adventures of a single hero facing adversity, usually war. In The Hobbit, in The Lord of the Rings, we have several heroes, really, but we tend to have one from each group. We have the elves, and we have Um, we have Bilbo Baggins, Frodo Baggins in the Hobbits. But then we also have Gandalf, who's a wizard who is helping the West. But the real hero is I can't remember his name all of a sudden, but he's the human king who is trying to resurrect his kingdom and give a defense against Sauron. 3, told in a wide scope with many adventures, and the idea is to represent the known world of the time. Okay, so in the Lord of the Rings, they travel from the far west, which is representative of England, to the mountains of the east, which in that time represented mainly Central and Eastern Europe. So it would be like the Balkans today. And that's where there were a lot of fascist movements during Tolkien's time. And the adventures involve all kinds of things, from meeting other races, meeting the elves, and seeing the way people have different ceremonies and different rituals and different discoveries and things like that. Then there's major adversity and a central enemy. Of course, the central enemy is Sauron, who's the evil lord of the Eastern world, the slave world. And he throws people into his mountain for sacrifice, and we see people falling off. And it doesn't matter because they're slaves, so we get the idea that individualism doesn't matter in the East, where in the West it does matter, even with people as odd as the hobbits. By the way, the hobbits' feet are symbolic. Not many people think about this, but they don't wear shoes and they have big feet. Why is that? My take on it is that they're homebodies, because Tolkien thought the English were very homebound, which they are. They're not great travelers. Well, that's not true, actually. The actual real British are superb world travelers, but the hobbits were not. Because the common English people like to stay around home, and they like their houses, they like their gardens, they like to eat cookies. So that's what the hobbits are always doing. They're eating cookies, drinking tea. And the feet represent the fact that they're kind of, their souls are sort of planted in their home, in their village. Okay. 5, an epic always has a list of highly significant things that are important to the nation. So we get a timeline of wars. We have famous gods, of course. Interestingly, in the Lord of the Rings, they don't mention gods because they don't have pantheistic gods like they do. The Greeks have several gods. Pantheistic simply means more than one. There's more than one god, several gods. In the Lord of the Rings, we know that there's a god, but they don't speak of him really as God. But we do have tons of famous warriors and human, elf. We even have the trees. Warriors, they're called Ents. We have the kind of demonic warriors, they're called wraiths. They appear as raiders in various places, or kidnappers. 6, supernatural agency, meaning supernatural forces in this world, is important in the lives of people. They must follow the rules of gods, and they also have to follow whatever the pieties are, meaning the rules that the gods want you to follow, like whether you should slaughter an animal, whether you should be hospitable. It's very important to the Greeks, by the way, to be hospitable to a stranger. And that is because in the ancient world you could find yourself a stranger almost any time if you crossed the sea, and they expected to be treated well, and treat other people like they would want to be treated. And also there was the idea that gods took human form, and they thought they might be meeting a god at any given time if he was a stranger. So of course they wanted to treat them well. But we also, in the Lord of the Rings, for example, we find out that Gandalf is a wizard. In the pre-Christian, he kind of represents the pre-Christian pagan era, in which there were good wizards and bad wizards. He's a good wizard. He doesn't interfere in the lives of men unless he's asked. So kind of like the Holy Spirit, he's a gentleman. He doesn't intrude in somebody's life unless he's asked to. And then we have, like I said, we have the race, and we have the evil, kind of the evil spirits that appear as ghost-like figures. For the bad guys. 7, travel into the unknown or fighting in a winner-take-all risk is necessary to the narrative. This is a test of that nation's endurance and dedication. So even the hobbits, the lowly hobbits who are not warriors, they're simple village people. But they have to travel in a winner-take-all risk, because when they go with the elves and the dwarves to go meet the human king, there's no guarantee that they're going to come back. So it is a winner-take-all risk. Same thing with the Greeks. Love is usually a motivating factor in action. Here we don't have a great love story in the early parts of The Lord of the Rings, but at the end of The Lord of the Rings, we have a marriage between the elf, if I remember, the elf princess and the human king. And so we have an alliance of 2 free kingdoms that are consummated in a marriage. And most in the ancient world, a marriage usually, or a reunification of true love, is extremely important to solidify the idea of family as the underpinning of that society. 9, honor is involved in families staying together and their reputation. So what is honor? Honor is your values and reputation represented in your action. In other words, you have to act according to the values that your society prescribes. So the societies in The Lord of the Rings, they have very sort of dissimilar values. The dwarves are a little bit more punkish than the elves. The elves are a little bit more elite, elitists, I guess you would say. And the humans are kind of a mixed bag. But we do have some heroic action with the younger prince, who I think was played by Viggo Mortensen. Sorry, I lost my mic for a minute. So the honor is involved, of course, with the, particularly in the human kingdom, with trying to save the kingdom itself and the extent to which they go. And number 10, war is typically fought on 2 fronts, home and abroad. So this is certainly true in the Greek epic we're going to read. And it's somewhat true in the Lord of the Rings, except that the war is typically fought, most of the war is fought abroad against Sauron. But when they come home, they're also followed home and they have to defend their homes against these evil people. And then we even get the invasion account, things like kidnapping and so on, which is an extension of war. And so those are the similarities to the epic. Okay, so I hope this course goes well for you, and I will be grading your stuff every morning. If you have a question, please email me. My email address is on the course syllabus, course schedule that I've downloaded, Coulter@Lee University, spelled out, .edu. I am on social media, but don't try and contact me on social media because I check those very infrequently. And I always check the email. It may not be at 3 o'clock in the morning, but it will be the next business day, and I'll respond to your questions, and I'll answer them and contact you. Okay, so enjoy the course, and if you have any questions, let me know. Have a good one.